Mode. Here we go.
Okay.
Okay, so don't show this again. Okay. So I'm here with Laura Lippman, New York Times best-selling author, and we're here to talk about her brand new book, which is Murder Takes a Vacation. But before we do that, I want to congratulate you on being a 2025 Grand Master with Mystery Writers of America. You must be excited about that.
I'm very excited about it. I'm very excited about everything other than the fact that after this interview ends, I have to go take my daughter shoe shopping for what she's going to wear to the event. And I'm anticipating that this is going to be sheer hell, but at least we have her dress. Finding out what I was going to wear has been super easy. Getting her ready for the banquet's been a little harder.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I've attended those things over the years, and they're very laid back.
Oh yeah, no, it's going to be a lovely night, and there's nothing nicer than showing up for an honor where you don't have to sit in suspense. I've been on, I've been on a lot of short lists. I've won once and not won a lot of times. I mean, I used to joke that I had to be considered for Grand Master just for the sheer number of nominations. I think I've been nominated 7 times and won once. So, and I was like, I've lost in 3 different categories. I feel like that's a real, claim to fame. So no, that's my crowd of people. Those are my people. And I'm going to be surrounded by friends and, just people with whom I've been working with for almost 30 years in the case of my
Wow.
agent. My
Wow.
agent and I got together in 1995. And that's when, and my first editor, who was my editor until like 18 months ago, 2 years ago. I don't know. I'm a little confused on time right now, but I had the same editor for a very long time. She left HarperCollins to go to Simon and Schuster. She had a pretty strict no compete clause, so it wasn't even like following her was an option. But I've had a really unusual career in terms of the sheer stability of my career.
Mhm.
Like, just kept going. So no, I'm thrilled.
Are you still with the same agent that you started with?
Oh yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
that's loyalty, my friend.
Well, we're very loyal to each other. And one of the things I tell younger writers about agents, I say, this is what I expect in an agent, which is that if I'm convicted of a capital crime and sentenced to execution, as I head down death row to the place where I will be executed, the one person I expect to still be on my side is my agent. Not my mom, nobody else, not my kids, not my loved ones. It's like I just believe that my agent is like that. My agent Vicky Bajor is just one of the most loyal. She's also incredibly upbeat. She's just
Mm,
always like glasses always half full. She always wants me to be happy. She wants all of her clients, and it's interestingly at least 2 of my friends ended up with Vicky after being with other agents, and I feel like there are more, but I can remember definitely 2 off the top of my head. 2 of my
mm.
oldest and closest friends have ended up with her. Um, I recommend her to anyone, but I also always tell people, Vicky, Vicky chooses people based on her passion for their work.
Mhm.
And I also try to tell people that there are definitely agents out there. I've met them. I've met them both in the publishing world and Hollywood world. And they will tell you, oh, yes, I can sell that.
Mhm.
And I don't think that's good enough because I think in this market, we need agents who believe in us and love our work
Mhm. Mhm.
because they're the people who are going to stick with you if maybe you take that great idea out and it's a complete shutout. I mean, my agent has been with me since 1995. I started really small. I started as a paperback original,
Mhm.
um, mass market, just slow and steady won the race. And she just recently was part of a huge Hollywood deal that involved buying all of the test novels and this is not typical what
Right.
happened. And, I will tell you that now this is where I did change agents. My Hollywood agents that I'm with now, I believe, are the third agents I worked with. The first one, I don't even remember the name. very nice person. They were very passive. The second agency, which I do remember but won't name, I also found it kind of passive.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally joined up with Sylvie Rabineau and Hillary Morgan Zeitz when they were a boutique agency that are now part of WME, and they've done great by me.
Mm.
So sometimes you do have to change, and I have had friends who have had to change literary agents, but no, Vicky's fantastic. And I also tell young writers that any agent, they're going to be pros and cons. Vicky's a one-woman agency, so we were slower to get into foreign markets because she's working with sub-agents, whereas like a big firm like Curtis Brown
Mm.
has a foreign rights department.
Right.
But I just, Vicky's the best, and I love her like the friend that she is, and feels so lucky and so supported, and I hope she never retires.
So tell me about the Tomorrow Studios deal.
Well, it feels like, these things actually go on forever. Um, the test materials, I believe, in my memory, the test books were optioned twice before.
Mm.
And one went nowhere. One was like kind of nutty, where it was just like, these are very naive people who are offering a very handsome option and nothing will probably happen.
Mm.
And then the second deal was pretty serious and it went a ways. And then when it was done, I said, in general, I don't want to write for Hollywood. I know more about writing for Hollywood than the average novelist because of my ex-husband. I'm just very familiar with that world. He created The Wire. He had many shows on TV. I know what it takes to make a TV show, and it's really hard.
Mm.
And I was like, in general, I'm really happy to have my work optioned. Obviously, Lady in the Lake was optioned. Every Secret Thing was optioned by Fran Dormand. There are two other options out there right now that are active, and I can't even remember if I'm supposed to talk about them, but I've always been like, yeah, take it away. I'm not, but Tess is such a personal character.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point I said, no, this I need to be involved with. And last summer I was out in Hollywood. I was actually out there because I was going to the wedding of my oldest friend's kid. And I stopped in to have lunch with Sylvie and Hillary. And we were talking about the Tess. Like, Tess was suddenly of the moment. Everyone wants these strong female protagonists. This is what, like, finally, 25 years in, we're here. And I know what I don't know. So I'm like, I'm going to have to work with a really strong showrunner. I can't do this on my own. And we'd been like looking, it's almost like I'd gone to a matchmaking service and like, what about this person? What about this person? Great list of people. And then at one point they said, how do you feel about Megan Abbott? I said, well, she's one of my best friends. So I was like, I don't know if this is what Megan would really want to do. So let me talk to her privately. And Megan was very persuasive that she would be over the moon to work on this. So I was like, okay, here's the dream team. And so this, we're talking, that was lunch last June. The contract was finalized like maybe a couple weeks ago. And now we have so much road ahead of us.
Yeah.
I know how much more. It's like, yeah, but it's real. It's like we were joking among ourselves. It's like, you hear there's certain deals that are announced, they're not really real. This is a real deal. And Tomorrow Studios, they're just the best. I mean, what's really funny is that they are involved with the production of The Better Sister, which is by my friend Alistair Burke.
Mm-hmm.
So, we just feel like, oh, wow. Like all of our friends are going to end up at Tomorrow Studios because they're the best and we're the best. And so anyway.
That's exciting. So I know you've got a long road ahead of you, but do you go ahead and you do a pilot script? Is that what your next step would be?
Next step is pitching.
Pitching. Okay.
So Megan and I have been meeting up and working on our pitch. And tomorrow we'll be, setting up meetings with various studios.
Right.
So next we pitch, and then fingers crossed, the pitch goes to pilot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Oh, that's exciting. That's very exciting.
I
So
think so.
now, while you're doing that, are you working on new written material?
I'm always working on a novel. The only thing that's changed over, I mean, I've started writing my first novel in 1993 and sold it, finished it in 94 and found an agent in 95. It took me like 6 to 8 months to find an agent. The only thing that's changed over 27 years of doing this is that once upon a time, because I was doing this while working full time,
Mhm.
is like novel went to New York, have to start next novel, like
Right,
never had any downtime.
right.
Now I allow myself to have downtime during, if I'm waiting for a copy edit, if I'm waiting for an edit, if I'm waiting for galleys, I don't rush into the next project. I really kind of want my brain to empty out so that when I start, so yeah, I'm working on something right now. Um, it's been hard. It's a hard time to write right now. I don't know any writer who doesn't feel a little
Yeah,
strange. Like what
yes.
what world am I writing for? Who will be my readers? Who will even be buying books in 2 years? But yeah, I'm working on a novel right now, working on the pitches, parenting an almost 15-year-old.
You have your hands full.
I don't lack for things to do, that's for sure.
Well, let's talk about Murder Takes a Vacation. I,
Okay.
it was a, for me, it was, I like the setting, I like the fact that you were going on that you had a character who was older in life. We have Muriel Blossom, who views herself as Mrs. Blossom. And so you have a character who is, I think, seeking her identity at that time. At the time of the story, she's come out of being a widow. Then she was taking care of her daughter and the grandchildren. Now all of a sudden she's on her own, and she miraculously finds this lottery ticket.
Yeah.
Whole life just explodes in a way. How did you come up with Muriel? I know she appeared in another work.
She's appeared in she's appeared in other test books, and she's appeared in a novella called The Girl in the Green Raincoat. And I've always been very fond of her. And I felt like I kind of underwrote her, that she has a lot more. I feel like I didn't take advantage of her layers. And, to be sure, I was in my late 40s when I created her. Is that right? Yeah, I was in my late 40s when I first wrote about her. At this point, Muriel and I are only 2 years apart. So
Mm.
that was a big change.
Yes.
Um, you know, I didn't consciously think of it as an autobiographical book, and it's not. We're so different, Mrs. Blossom and I. But we were going through something similar, which is I saw my marriage end. As a result of my marriage, this feels kind of tacky to say it, but my divorce settlement was kind of a lottery. I mean,
Okay.
I was married for, I was with someone for 20 years who worked in the television industry, and we put aside a lot of money because we lived relatively simply, and that money was divided between us. And so it's like, okay, here's money. Um, I'm at an age where it was like, do you want to stop working? I don't want to stop working. And as a matter of fact, I think it's important that I keep working. But like Mrs. Blossom, it was like, well, who am I now? Who am I now? I'm a single woman in my 60s. I have the total joker in the deck of also being the parent to a teenage girl, which is unusual, but that was my choice. But it's sort of like, well, who am I going to be now? And, one of the things, I have a lot of really young friends, um, something I've cultivated. And I think it's so easy to forget that these people in their 60s and their 70s and their 80s, they were young ones too, and they listened to avant-garde music, and they threw around their bodies around at clubs, and they did silly things, and like we all carry that with us. We may lose some contact with that younger self, but it's always there. And I was thinking a lot about my sister. My sister is Mrs. Blossom's age. Well, actually, my sister just turned 69, but I guess Mrs. Blossom will turn 69 this year too. And my sister is someone who, like Muriel Blossom, was shy, um, not particularly worldly. She married in her 20s and hardly ever traveled. I can think of the only time my sister ever got on a plane after the age of 25 was she and my mother came to Mexico to visit me one time. She would have been about 33. And then there was this couple of years there where, like, every year my parents would go spend the winter down in St. Simons, Georgia, and my sister and I would fly together. And my sister just didn't travel that often. Like, she was someone who was overwhelmed at the airport, but she had avant-garde taste in music. And, she had this entire life, and she was smart. And I kind of go back and forth. My sister is still alive, but she's in assisted living because of her Parkinson's. She's in a memory care unit. So I was thinking a lot about my sister, like the hidden depths of my sister that most people would never guess at, because she's so shy and unassuming. I am not shy or unassuming, but I have great respect for people who have the dignity to be those things. And, I also was just kind of interested in, being a woman in my 60s. I'm just really aware that I don't walk around feeling like I'm old. I don't I'm aware that other people often don't pay attention to me, or that you can see, like, I had to give blood last week because it was like in advance of a medical test. And I like put my arm out and I made a joke about how the band that, was tightened around my arm matched the band on my sweater. And the woman just looked at me like, another old lady just sitting here nattering. I mean, maybe she wasn't thinking that, but
Yeah.
I just realized I think actually this is, to be clear, I think all people, myself included, have a bad tendency to ignore other people and to not really be paying attention to anyone, and to really fall very quickly in the trap of stereotypes and just sort of disregarding others. Matter of fact, I feel like this problem became more widespread after the pandemic sort of ended or was declared over. I feel like the first time I went to a shopping mall after, months of not going to a shopping mall, I said to my daughter, it's like everybody here is starring in a different movie and everyone else is the extras and everyone's moving in, like, people are just like in their own world in a way, like I'm the star. I'm not noticing anybody else. And I just felt like that was, obviously it said so much about older women that it's almost a cliche that we're invisible, that nobody sees us. But I was just interested in the inner life of a 66-year-old, when she's a 68-year-old woman. And
To your comment, we have to make ourselves seen.
well,
Do you know what I mean?
I mean, it's funny because, first of all, I'm very tall. I'm very tall and I walk very fast. And I walk a lot in my neighborhood. So I am often seen. And the funnier thing is that Baltimore's a really small town. Like, it's, we call it Smaltimore. I get recognized in Baltimore, but it's almost always when I've just done something particularly embarrassing. I was leaving the ballpark on opening day, and it's like I was trying to like step over a rope in a stanchion, and I like tripped, and it was like, and as I'm like standing up, this woman says, "Oh, pretty dress," and then she says, "Are you Laura Lippman?" Just like, and I just, said to the people, "This never happens." It actually happens a lot. I didn't want people to know. So one of the things that's really weird is that one thing I figured out, and it's actually kind of the life lesson that Danny in the book tries to give to Muriel, is that being invisible is a little bit of a choice. Like, I dress up a lot. I'm kind of like known for it. was
Mhm.
like, I have all these pretty clothes. Why wouldn't I wear them?
Right.
And again, very tall, walk very fast, very loud laugh. Even then though, I'm still sometimes kind of invisible. So, but yeah, it's a little, you can choose to be seen. You can choose to, like, why would you, like, I feel like there's another character in the book, the designer, who says, you look like someone who's given up, you know, then,
Right.
like, choose something. Like, your choice shouldn't be the thing that just totally is neutral on everything, to wear neutral colors and have this neutral haircut and to just play everything down. You can choose to be seen.
Well, Muriel does that. She does choose to be seen as she
Eventually.
as she develops through the book. Because first, Danny takes her shopping and she, decides to take an interest in the way she looks and her hair. As you said, she takes interest in hair, she takes interest in scarves. So you see her wanting to be seen, but at the same time, she has these observational tools that she's gained working for the detective agency that she doesn't want to be seen because she wants to get information. But
Yeah,
that's what
she
happened
knows
to
how
Alan.
she knows how to play both sides of the street,
She
basically.
does. She
I
really
mean,
does.
there's a scene in the book where she literally kind of makes herself less recognizable when she realizes she's being followed. It's like, you know, take off the scarf, put on the sunglasses, crouch down. And, so it is a book that's very much about being a 60 something woman who happens to be the focus of a lot of people's attention because they think she has a stolen antiquity.
Right, exactly. So what made you have her take a trip on the Seine?
Wow. I think it was because initially, I think it's because it seemed kind of knowable to me. I'd been to France. I was like, I was determined for a long time writing this book to do this entirely through my imagination. It's like, I'll download
Mhm.
an itinerary. And it's an excellent question because I've actually spent a lot more time in Italy than I have in France. I spent a lot of time in Tuscany. There are certain places I knew better, England, I could have,
Mhm.
but I don't know. It's just sort of the perfect getaway. It seemed like the trip she would choose. And then, about a year into writing this book, I was like, I'm just going to have to take this trip. I can't do the book if I don't take the trip. And like literally booked I think no more than 6 weeks transpired between me booking the trip and going on the trip. And I'm so glad I did. First of all, I went with my kid and it was just a really cool experience. But there's always, I mean, I was a reporter, so I don't romanticize research. I think it can even be a kind of dangerous rabbit hole. But if you do just enough research, there's always just some perfect detail. There's just always something that you never would have come up with. And that certainly happened on my trip.
It also adds a layer of authenticity.
One hopes.
It
One
really
hopes.
does. You mentioned like the little churches. You mentioned, getting, going to a certain cafe to have a drink. And I really think that people love that. People love being able to identify because maybe they've gone on that trip as well.
I
They're
mean,
part of
the
the brand.
restaurant where Mrs. Blossom meets Danny is a very real restaurant that my daughter and I ate at, and the courses described were as we ate. A lot of the details about shipboard life were true. Our devotion to that BLT sandwich is absolutely a true thing, and everybody on the ship talked about it. Like, you've just never, I mean, the club sandwich, you've just never had a club sandwich like this. And we would just like sit there like, why is this club sandwich so good? Yeah, a lot of those, those details were good. I think the thing that was sort of like the unexpected gift, because it was a last minute change to our itinerary, was going to Rommel's chateau, where in fact I did climb the castle keep, and where the tour guide, I was the person the tour guide was staring at during giving the whole conversation about how hard the climb was. Don't feel obligated to do it. There's no and I was just like, why is he looking at me? I'm one of two people on this entire ship who's used the gym during this vacation. But it gave me a lot of insight. And also it was just, I feel very privileged to have seen where Monet lived, to
Hmm.
have seen his gardens first thing
Renee.
in the morning. Um, it was just such a great trip. We had the best time.
Well, you went with your daughter on the trip, but in the book, Muriel goes with her best friend Eleanor.
Yes.
And it seems like they're on two separate vacations.
Well, Eleanor, for a woman in her 60s, is definitely boy crazy.
Yeah.
But I think, I think when I started the book, and this is a bit of a spoiler, so you might want to edit it out, but um, I think starting the book, I just assumed that Mrs. Blossom was going to end up in a romance by the end of the book. The book is very much inspired by the movie Charade. But I was
Can't
watching.
believe you said that. I hate to interrupt you. That's exactly what I thought of. And Danny reminded me so much of the Cary Grant
Well, see,
character.
in my idea, when I was watching Charade, one thing I love about Charade is that Charade is a really unusual Hollywood movie in that Cary Grant never stops talking about the age difference between him and Audrey Hepburn. He's like,
Right.
I'm too old for you. I'm too old for you. And, nowadays you have these 30-year age gaps. No one even thinks about it. And I was watching Charade, which I have probably seen 10, 11 times.
Mhm.
And I was like, how does this movie play if the woman is the older one
Mhm.
and the man is the younger one? How does it play if, so I was just fiddling around with that. And yeah, you could almost call it an homage to Charade in some ways.
I can't
Um,
believe you said that. Wonderful. It was what I mean, Danny was the Cary Grant chameleon. You never knew who he was. Was he lying to you? Is he telling you the truth?
you get to the end of the book and you don't know his sexual orientation,
Right,
which Mrs. Blossom realizes is none of her business.
right.
And that's, a little bit of a growth moment for her to stop thinking in such very stark ways about people's identity. It's like Mrs. Blossom is, I think, an evolved character. She wants to do right by people. She wants to use the right pronouns.
Mhm.
She wants to be always polite and considerate. And in this world, she's often tongue-tied. And I think that is a situation that a lot of us who are older find ourselves in. And for me, what I always tell people, or what I always think, like some people seem to feel put upon because they have to think about what they're saying and whether it has a meaning that might have been lost to them or they never thought about. I think it's an enormous privilege to examine your language and think about what's acceptable. I'm a huge fan of Spelling Bee in the New York Times. It's like kind of the centerpiece of my life right now. I mean, I could be wrong. I could be making a mistake. But today the puzzle, which has the letters AGINPR, with P is the letter that you must use, it will not accept the word raping.
Hmm.
And I'm like, okay, there's some other words that are kind of cruel
Mhm.
or can be used in racist contexts that the puzzle won't accept. And I get that. And in this case, I'm kind of like, I don't know. I don't know if you can just stop using a word because it's unpleasant. If you accept killing, which they would, you
Mhm.
got it anyway. So, but I'm interested in that. And what I think is, literally after our last election, there were young people who gave these interviews in New York Magazine who said things like, well, I just want to be able to say, I'm going to put this in quotes because I would never say this word, but this is like a literal thing people said. I want to be able to say retard again. It's like, why?
Right,
Why? What
right.
you're saying is like, you want to be indifferent to people's feelings. You want to be cruel. You want to be unkind. And you feel, so Mrs. Blossom is not that person. She's the other side of the coin who really wants to get it right and often finds herself silent because she doesn't know the right thing to say. And Danny is sort of her entry point into learning that other people don't owe you all the information about their identity, that is it really any of your business unless someone makes it your business about
Right.
what their sexual proclivities are. She's learning, and that's part of what's going on through the book, is she's broadening her horizons. She's opening herself up to the world by traveling. She's opening up her own world, her own interest. The book actually ends with a dead on, I guess it's a simile.
Spoilers, no spoilers.
But it's the end of the book is a metaphor about the expansiveness of the life before her.
Mm.
So, that she's 68 years old and there's a lot of life in front of her.
Well, when you think about, she was so naive at the beginning of the story because she's been very sheltered. She's been taking care of her daughter and her daughter's family, who abandoned her and moved to Japan without even asking this poor woman who's dedicated the past 10 years of her life to them. I mean, I was horrified by that, but I understood it. Um, so she books this trip, probably maybe not on a whim because she seems like she's a very thoughtful
Yeah.
person.
I think that's her response to coming into this unexpected windfall, is
Yeah.
that she should treat herself. She hasn't treated herself to very much in life. You have the sense of someone this in this way. Mrs. Blossom reminds me a lot of my mom. Uh, my mom died last September very unexpectedly. She was 93. She'd been in great health. She was fantastic. She was having a wonderful life. And 3 weeks later, she was gone.
Mm.
And my mom, who was a school librarian, married to a journalist, left a pretty sizable estate.
Mm.
And as the person who's taking care of all of this, I I know my mom was being careful, and that my mom was trying to make sure that she could always take care of herself. So she was very, very conservative with money. But I was like, oh, you could have taken one great trip a year. My mother loved to travel. My mother loved to travel, but by the time she died, the last big trip she had been on was a trip to Italy with me. I took her to Tuscany one year where I taught. I think that would have been in 2017. And the following year, 2018, we all went to Atlanta together, which is where she was from. So by 2018, my mom was 87. She was getting a little slower, but and when I came back from my trip up the Seine, she said, could I have gone on that trip? And I said, you absolutely could have. These companies actually have a rating system for how active you have to be. And we were actually talking about like a 3-generation trip.
Mm.
And, so, Muriel, in her caution, in her conservatism, in her desire to live well within her means and never, she was widowed relatively young. I'll give her
Yes.
that. She reminds me a lot of my mom too.
Did d- I had a question also about, we're talking a little bit about the the inspiration for the artifact. I mean, I thought immediately of the Maltese Falcon.
Sure, that's a big part of it. Yeah, that's a definite. I am a docent at the American Visionary Art Museum. And as a consequence of that sideline, I'm a volunteer. I've become really interested in museums in general. And I am fascinated by these issues of provenance that have been in the news almost constantly.
Mhm.
Like, it turns out this is stolen. It turns out this wasn't acquired fairly. This has been appropriated. Where does this belong? What is the British Museum going? And I have just found that so interesting. Yeah, it's a total ode to the Maltese Falcon. which, by the way, is rumored to have been inspired by an architectural detail in Baltimore, because Dashiell Hammett lived in Baltimore, and he was a private eye here with a very famous PI firm whose name just flew out of my head. And there was a building in downtown Baltimore called the Continental Building that had birds on it that may have been black at the time that Hammett was here. They were gold by the time this story began circulating. So yeah, I felt entitled to tip my hat to one of another writer who passed through Baltimore.
So tell me about a little bit about being a docent.
It's just the greatest thing. The Visionary Art Museum, which is, I would say now, the preferred term, sort of the umbrella term for what some people call outsider art, folk art, art brut. That's all of that. It's a big tent name. For our purposes, it just means that the artists are self-taught. It happens to be right here in my neighborhood. And in the summer of 2022, they put out their first call for new docents since the pandemic. And I applied and I was accepted into the training class. We try to give a minimum of 2 tours a month. And we have monthly training, September through May. And we're just the greatest little band of misfit toys, because the people who are drawn to being docents at the Visionary Art Museum, we're all a little weird, but in a great way. And I love it. I find it so, it just keeps a part of my mind alive. And it requires me to learn stuff. It requires me to learn so much about the artist and the permanent collection. And then every September there's a new exhibit, so there's something new to learn. There's new material to master. We take it really seriously. Like, we talk a lot about how to talk to different ages, and how to make transitions that feel meaningful to our visitors. We just had a email go around about, there's this great exhibit called The World's First Robot Family, which is 7 robots made out of old car parts and gasoline station parts and wires and tubing and ducts. And it's super heteronormative. And we were like, so we have this whole discussion about, how do you handle the fact that a lot of our visitors may not come from families with a mom and a dad and a sister and a brother and a family pet? How do you deal with that? What do you choose to focus on? These are the kind of conversations we have all the time. And, I was thinking about this today because there's an exhibit. It's not permanent, but it's been there on loan for a while. It's about the art inspired by genocide. And it's only because I'm a docent that I know that the term genocide didn't even exist until the 40s. And so I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's just, AVAM, as we call it, the American Visionary Art Museum, is just one of my happy places. I'm a big collector of visionary art, and it's heaven.
Aren't people freaked out when you give them a tour and they find out who you are?
It was interesting because when I interviewed, they said, how are you going to deal with that? And I said, I'll just acknowledge that I'm the writer and move on. Most of my visitors are little kids. They don't have any idea who I am. It's happened a couple of times with older groups. And you say, yes, I'm the writer, but, I'm here today as your docent. Let me talk to you about art. It's not, and people are fine with that.
Have you always been interested in art?
Yeah, I think I have been. I had one of those great once in a lifetime teachers for 2nd and 3rd grade, Lorraine Shapiro. I remember her name, and she loved art, and she would carve out time for once a week to talk to us about artists. And so 2nd and 3rd grade, I'm learning about Picasso and Chagall and Matisse and Klee and Miro and Monet. And the Baltimore Museum of Art has an unusually good collection of Matisse paintings, because there were a pair of, I guess at their time, they would have been called spinster sisters, who traveled to Europe a lot. became friends with Gertrude Stein. As a matter of fact, I think Gertrude Stein sold him a major Matisse because she needed some money. So I grew up going to the Baltimore Museum of Art. When I went to Texas, I fell in love with Mexican folk art. I began collecting that. And I began collecting visionary art because the thing about visionary art is it's affordable. Like
Mm,
if you're, and the internet has just made it easier to find.
mm.
So yeah, I've been interested in art my entire life.
So, can you tell me a little bit about your writing process? You kind of hinted about that you do the research, and do you outline, or did you know where Muriel was going from the beginning of the story, or did she develop as you continued on?
I mean, even with a novel where I had a literal itinerary, I didn't know where we were going.
Yeah.
I had a couple of ideas in mind. Um, I knew where the statue was,
Well,
but I hadn't figured everything out. This is the first book I worked on with my new editor, Danielle Dietrich, and she pushed me really hard to deepen all of the characterizations.
mm,
And I found that to be incredibly valuable. Um, to recognize that every character in the book services the themes of the book.
mhm, mhm,
I think all of the characters in this book are people who are in danger of not being seen, um, who are a little bit lonely.
mhm,
I would say that's true of every character in this book is a little bit lonely. And how they deal with that loneliness varies from person to person. Um, so I'm what's known as a pantser. I don't try to outline. That would kind of kill it for me. Part of the reason I've been struggling with the book I'm working on is because it's inspired by one of my old short stories. And I just told my friends in the group chat today that I realized that I just had to kind of throw everything out
mm,
and pretend like I don't know what's going on. And through that, I think I'll be able to find my way through. My process is that I try to show up every morning and work for 2 to 3 hours, which should produce 1,000 words.
mm.
That's what I try to do. World's been a little crazy over the past year because of events in my family, and but for the most part, that's what I do. And you know, I do a lot of drafts. Like the
Mm.
first, no one's going to see the first draft,
Yeah,
and there'll be big changes.
yeah.
I definitely subscribe to the idea of no surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader. And I'm always, there's always something I'm writing about that's just not the mystery. Like it's, which is, I think most of the best crime writers are trying to do that. It's not just about, oh, this got stolen, this person got killed, who did it, why did they do it? Like all of these stories provide an opportunity to write about something that's thematically interesting.
Right, right. You mentioned the theme of these people are lonely, and it seems like Muriel is really searching for friends when she becomes friendly with Pat.
Yeah, she definitely is. And she's really flattered that someone so worldly and sophisticated and well off would find her interesting and funny, which she does. It's a very sincere friendship. Eleanor is lonely and sees the solution to her loneliness as being a traditional romantic relationship. I mean, the thing that Muriel has to open her eyes to is there are a lot of different ways to make friends in the modern world. And
Mhm.
it's not necessarily people your age or people just like
Right.
you. She has to broaden her experience that way. And when she does that, she begins to see also, and this is kind of a tribute to, I love the film adaptation of Nick Hornby's About a Boy.
Mhm.
And, the last line of it is, one person isn't enough. You need a team.
Right.
And I think Muriel is realizing, Eleanor is a very satisfactory friend for some things, but there are other things that she needs other friends for. So, she needs to, and, she's back home in Baltimore, probably will end up taking a little casework from Tess Monahan now that she's home. But I think she's really going to enjoy her retirement in Baltimore. I think she's seen the way forward to um, A deeply wonderful life, to quote a favorite line from Laurie Colwin.
I think she was very upset about Alan's death.
Well, heck yeah, I'd be upset too.
You know,
You meet this really charming man who seems, and he's dead within 48 hours.
24 or 48 hours, right?
I have a
They
friend,
didn't even pick out the restaurant where they were going to meet.
I know, he was pretty dreamy. Some things come to light that make him seem less so, but um, it's so funny because just last week, a friend who's probably about Muriel's age sent out a newsletter about this incredible romantic escapade she had. And I was just like, wow, that's fantastic. So yeah, I like to think that things keep happening to us until they don't.
What you mentioned Dashiell Hammett. What other writers inspired you?
Well, I mean, the writers I like, whether they're straightforward inspiration, I'm not sure that's correct, but I love James Cain.
Mhm.
He's big for me. Um, you know, both both Sue Grafton and Sarah Paretsky were huge inspirations as a woman who wrote PI fiction. God, I read so much, and I have these horrible, horrible blank moments now.
Mhm.
Um, I'm real. Oh, Deborah Levy,
Mhm.
her memoirs were some of the most meaningful reading I did during the pandemic, and I don't think most people would like look at my murder mystery and be like, oh yes, of course, that's like influenced by Deborah Levy. But on some level it was, because she was writing about this, she's writing with incredible detail and precision about her life over many decades. um Gosh. uh,
This book had the wit of Elmore Leonard.
well, I've always kind of seen Leonard as one of my role models,
Yeah.
and in the sense of, I would say he was a career role model. His style is admirably laconic. Like, I don't think I'll ever quite achieve the economy that Leonard had with words, but
Yes.
he's someone who just kept writing and writing and writing, and he got up every day. And I think part of it is that, I mean, the thing about Leonard is that at a certain point, people will start saying, well, wait a minute, maybe he's just a good writer. Maybe we don't have to think of him as a genre writer. Maybe he's just a good writer. And I wouldn't mind it if one day people just, I mean, I want that for all genre writers. Not
Mhm.
by the way, not all genre writers are are trying that hard to exploit the genre for all it can do, but some of us are. And I think at some point, it's nice to see that recognition. It's nice to see Elmer Leonard kind of went that way. I think people tend to read Dennis Lehane that way. They're like, oh, Dennis Lehane is like a literary writer. Like, yeah, sure. A lot of us are.
Do you, besides being a genre writer, do you see yourself crossing over? Do you see yourself as an amalgam of a lot of different genres? I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
I mean, not so far.
Mhm.
Um, when I started working on the book that I'm currently working on, there was a part of me that was like, well, what if, can you do auto fiction in a crime novel? And I decided, yes, you can, but I don't want to. And then it was sort of like, can there be a speculative aspect to a crime novel? And again, it was like, yes, but that's not what I'm trying to do here.
Mhm.
My daughter and I'm an unusual mom. I took my 14-year-old daughter to see the R-rated Sinners over the weekend, and I loved it. And part of the thing I loved about it is that it's like 5 movies in one. I mean, yes, they're vampires, but it's more than a vampire movie. So, I mean, I'm just like looking for ways to kind of push and pull. And, my daughter's addicted to slime, which I actually hate, but my writing is kind of like, I'm like playing with slime. It's like, what if you did that? What if you did that? What if you did that? And yeah, that's where I'm headed.
Well, I really, I have one more question for you. What's your guilty pleasure?
Well, I don't believe in guilty pleasures. I don't think we should feel guilty about
Guilty,
the
right?
things that give us pleasure. The pleasure that I have that other people would like me to feel guilty about is I am a long time aficionado of reality television. Not
Oh,
all of it, not all of it. For some, like I've never watched Survivor, but I loved MTV's Real World, and I have continued to watch the so-called challenges between the, I just said to my trainer the other day, I was like, I was way over invested in the outcome of the most recent challenge. I watched the Real Housewives shows, and I find the thing about reality television though is that it's most interesting in its initial iteration, and
mhm,
then the show is like a photocopy. And as these franchises continue, they just become more and more rote because now people are coming on the show knowing what the show is. But when you watch a reality show in its earliest iteration, you are being shown how people attempt to present themselves
mhm,
when they're under the misconception that they have control of their image.
mhm, mhm.
You
Right.
get to hear how people speak and what they emphasize and what they think is important. So yeah, I love reality television, zero guilt about it. Um, yeah, pretty much reality television and dark chocolate and
Oh,
gin.
that's dark chocolate's healthy for you, so you don't have to.
Again, I don't feel guilty about any of these things, but like the things that I think other people would try to take away from me are reality television, dark chocolate, and gin. Those are my those are that's my holy trinity.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with me, Laura. And I hope to meet you. I'm going to see you. I'm going to the Mystery Writers Conference on the 30th.
Oh yeah, I'll be there. I will be there. Yeah, for
So,
sure.
yeah, you're being interviewed then again. So, of course. So, I will come up and introduce myself to you.
I
But
look forward to it. Take care. It was so nice talking to you.
thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And good luck next week and with the book.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.